Hi, I'm Sarah Trott, and welcome to the Fourth Trimester Podcast. I'm a new mama, and this podcast is all about postpartum care for the first few months following birth, the time period also known as the fourth trimester. My postpartum doula, Esther Gallagher, is my co-host. She's a mother, grandmother, perinatal educator, birth and postpartum care provider. Fourth trimester care, our topic, is about the practical, emotional, and social support parents and baby require. And importantly, it helps set the tone for the continuing journey of parenting. Hi, this is Sarah Trott, and welcome back to the Fourth Trimester Podcast. Today, I'm joined by special guest Kathleen Lockyer, and she is an occupational therapist with nearly 3 decades of experience supporting babies, parents, and nervous systems in early life. I am absolutely thrilled to have her on the program today. She is also the author of Wild Inside and the creator of NatureLed, which is a framework grounded in how nervous systems develop with movement, connection, and the natural world. So I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that. And really, this conversation today is about nervous system design. We, as parents and caregivers, perinatal professionals, it's really useful to know what is it in relation to the nervous system that we can influence in early life or encourage or allow, create space for, because we want better sleep, calm, lifelong health, right? These are all goals that we have for the people we are nurturing. So that's our discussion today. We're going to really dive into what actually matters when it comes to infant development and nervous system regulation. So welcome to the program, Kathleen.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really excited to find your podcast and hear all the great conversations you have for this fourth trimester. And I wish you had been around when I was in my fourth trimester.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Well, I'm absolutely thrilled, as I said, to have you on the program and talk about infant nervous systems, because it's something that we don't maybe talk about as much. And certainly like that level of detail isn't something that was covered for me when I was doing my birth prep and my hospital course that I think we got thrown in there when you sign up for your birth. So I'm just really excited to talk about this. And I would welcome you also as we kick off just to anything else about you and your background and introduce yourself in your own words.
Well, I'm an occupational therapist, and so we talk about roles, not so much who am I, but what are my roles in life? And so my favorite role is mama. I am the mother of 2 children by birth. One of them is 28 and the other is 24, and then a couple of bonus kids. So I really started this journey back when I found out I was pregnant, and it was a surprise to me. I had one of those whoops, guess what? Right after I graduated college. And I had just become an occupational therapist. So I had all this training, but when I became pregnant and life got really fast, I realized that there was a lot I didn't know about growing a human and how to do that in a way that felt good to me, but also honored where I had come from, which I had come from a background of what we now call ACEs, so adverse childhood experiences and a high stress childhood. And so I had some concern about how I was going to really support my children. And I hadn't originally thought about going into pediatrics. I was going to go into mental health. But when I had my children, I went into pediatrics and started learning very quickly that to understand the mental health of adults, we had to understand their childhoods and their early childhoods specifically. So it took me on this long arc of the last 30 years at the intersection of not just occupational therapy and human development, but nature connection, because that is a big piece of our human design, is connecting with nature.
Absolutely. What a wonderful journey you've been on, and your own experience shaped where you are today in terms of having children and becoming a mother, which I find is like a common theme with a lot of our most inspired speakers. So I appreciate you sharing that. So where do you want to start with this conversation? What's the context? Can we really design better outcomes when it comes to nervous system in early life?
Yes, yes, and yes. That is why I'm so excited about your podcast, really focusing on the early time of our lives. And hopefully a lot of pregnant folks listen to this too, because the one thing that we can understand is that we don't have to know everything. We don't have to have all the science. We don't have to really do the formulas that we read in these books, because we can step outside into a million-year-old technology to support the nervous systems for ourselves and for our babies. And when we support our own nervous systems, that does support our babies' nervous systems. And nature connection can be quite simple, and it's how we developed over a million years, how we evolved to become the humans that we are. And it's literally just through our sensory motor systems, which I like to say are like less of individual experiences and more of an orchestra. So we come with these senses, and some scientists will identify hundreds. But in the child development conversation, especially the world of occupational therapy and sensory integration, we often discuss about 8 of those, and those are sight, sound, taste, touch, hearing, smell, and something called interoception, which is literally our gut sense. It's how our bodies, our guts talk to our brain. And so we come wired and ready to develop these things, but it's not automatic. We have to engage them. And so you can look at each sense like it's an instrument. And you might have a beautiful instrument, but it won't do anything until you pick it up and you start to practice with it over and over and over. And then eventually you make good music with it. And that's how our senses are. But they're meant to play as an orchestra. They're meant to play as a symphony together. And so nature is our original conductor of that orchestra. And I believe we have this sense called ecoception, that I developed this word because I was trying to figure out what this interaction I was witnessing between my young children and the children I worked with was. And so I came up with this word when I started writing Wild Inside, ecoception, which is really just our readiness to receive nature's signals. So I thought we could start there.
So that's perfect.
Really, the first time I looked at that piece was when my first daughter was about 5 months old. So she was still in that fourth trimester zone, I think.
Yeah.
We used to hear when my kids were young, we used to hear 9 months in, 9 months out. That was what the grandmothers said. So she was about 5 months old, and I was overwhelmed. I was really overwhelmed. And I lived in Connecticut. It was wintertime. And so we'd spent this 5 months really inside. It was cold out. And it was the first spring day that we had. And I took her outside. And it wasn't the first time I took her outside, but I took her outside, and it was that warm breeze that you get in the spring in the Northeast. And this breeze came up and it hit her face. And when it did, she had this big gasp reaction. She went, and when she did that, I looked at her and I laughed, and she looked to me and she laughed too. And then she turned back to the wind and she did it again. And she put her face right in and she and threw her hands up, and then I laughed. And so we had this little dance between her and that stimulation on her skin from the wind, and then her to me and me to her. And I didn't know at that moment what that was, but I knew it was a defining moment for me in learning how to habilitate a human and also how to calm our nervous systems and to engage with the world. And so years later, I discovered the Harvard Center for the Developing Child's Serve and Return Interaction term, which I do remember hearing on a previous podcast of yours. There was some discussion on that. And so I thought that's what that moment was. But it wasn't just between me and my daughter. It was between my daughter and nature's stimuli, that wind to her skin. So the wind served her, and then she responded. And that is truly what builds our capacity in life, is each one of those sensory moments of stimulation where we pay attention and we say, yes, this is important.
Mm.
And then we develop our sensory motor systems. And the more we develop our sensory motor systems, the greater our capacity to organize our neurological system and our nervous systems. And nature had a way of doing that for millennium until a fraction of an eyelash of time. We really engaged through this contextual experience of all our senses engaging, firing, and wiring with nature.
It was nature and your baby and you all sharing that same serve and return experience.
Yeah. So that's where ecoception came from.
What a cool story. And so when it comes to encouraging or designing or allowing space for that kind of interaction, like what are the things to consider if there's someone who's pregnant listening or has their new infant at home and they're interested in exploring this more? What are some of the things that we actually need to think about or be aware of during those first months of life so that we really can develop in this way?
Yeah. That's really the reason I wrote Wild Inside, because that exact question was the question I was trying to answer when I was pregnant. And I was
Yeah.
reading all the books and there's a lot of great books and a lot of great information out there, but to me it just felt overwhelming. And I was
Yeah.
looking for that more organic, what I now know to be permission to just be with my baby. And so nature allows us to do that. We can literally begin while we're pregnant. And the beautiful thing about if someone's listening to this and they're pregnant and they haven't entered the fourth trimester yet, just the practice of stepping outside, sitting on your front step, looking at the breeze through the trees, closing your eyes for a moment, tuning into bird sound, watching the sunrise if you're somewhere that you can do that, watching the sunset, engaging in any element of the natural world, and it's the way it invites us in, is a good practice to begin with at any time, really. But when you're pregnant or when your baby is in the early months of their lives, because it structures the brain and it helps the brain pattern on that experience. And the more we can pattern our brain on these positive nature experiences, then the brain sees it as something familiar and comfortable to do when things get overwhelming. And so, like I said, even sitting on the front step and doing nothing, putting your phone down, doing nothing is the most important thing to do when it comes to or what it looks like doing nothing. You're actually really engaging your nervous system in a way that helps it organize itself when you tune into nature. And so anytime we can create a healthy pattern, it's easier to access in those moments of overwhelm of the early parenting months, especially.
So using nature as a calming tool for the parent, the adult, the caregiver is really valuable.
It's highly valuable and it's not even nice to have, it's essential. And we've moved inside for 97% of our lives. That's what the statistics say with time use in the United States, especially. And when you consider that 100% of our time was spent in nature, in these experiences prior to the last couple hundred years, then that speaks volumes for where we're at today with what I call underdevelopment too of children. So this isn't just about calming ourselves. It's really about building that brain structure and the whole foundation of our developmental experience from what we can then further develop when we get into school. And that foundation is everything throughout our lives, as I know you talk about quite a bit on this podcast.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I want to know how you would describe someone new to some of these ideas. Like, how would you describe what the infant nervous system is?
Mm. The infant nervous system is really like, you could look at it like a house that's just framed. So when we arrive, we're born undeveloped. And the nervous system is really about developing our entire brain framework, from which we then develop all our higher cognitive skills like organizing our thoughts and regulating our emotions, regulating our body, having the capacity to use our fine motor and gross motor skills to write and learn to read. And so the nervous system is the support system for all those things to be able to happen successfully. And so if you think of a baby like a house, it's not a great analogy, and the house is born with the framing and the wiring and the plumbing. But to make the house a nice place to live, you need to add all the nice things like the walls and the furniture and the paint and the roof and all and the carpet if you like. And otherwise it's just a fraction of what we could have. So the nervous system really builds out the rest of the house after a child is born. And it's not an automatic thing. We have to engage to develop. And so if you think about the nervous system in that way, you can kind of understand that it's not just nice to have, not just a nice thing to do to develop. You know, I've worked with so many kids around across the age groups. And what I find today mostly is kids in third, fourth grade are really, really struggling. And what's going on is just that underdevelopment of those early years, that nervous system regulation where I think this modern time, and it's no fault of the parents, you know, we're so distracted and we're so overwhelmed that it's easy to forget to pick up that baby, to look at that baby, to step outside to breathe with that baby, to allow that baby to lean into the wind and to discover all of the pieces that go into making a human. And then that's the most important thing to do, not putting on the right music, not even pulling out the books, but engaging.
Yeah, I've heard people talking about infant massage in this way, or just simple serve and return eye contact, words, voice, touch, all these things in support of developing neural pathways. Is that what you're talking about?
Yep. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah. It's really making those connections, the firing and the wiring and the what's going on under the, if we were to lift the cap off, it's connecting the brain to the body. It's connecting the fingers to the hand, to the wrist, to the elbow, to the shoulder, and helping the brain learn to predict its environment too. That's a big part of the nervous system because we're not wired to respond and react to the world. We're actually wired to predict the world. And the better we get at predicting our environment, the less anxiety we have.
Yeah. I appreciate that you said put the phone down. Mm-hmm. I really like that you said put the phone down because it's a good reminder that this is about human connection and authenticity and responsiveness and not finding the perfect app for something or the perfect technology for something. Technology is great. I'm a lover of technology. I'm very pro. But when it comes to human development in this way, I've heard it from others, and you're emphasizing this point so perfectly, right? That children need that serve and return, not for 100%, I've heard, of every serve. Like if you miss a couple finger points or something, your baby's not doomed. But in general, it's about presence.
Yeah, the presence is key. And really, it's what do we want our babies to pattern on? Because the pointing, the catching those serves, it's really about, do we want our children to pattern on us looking at a screen or them looking at a screen? Because when we don't attend to some of those other serves, then they learn that they're not important. For example, if And I am deeply grateful that we did not have screens when my babies were young. And that was a real gift to me. So I really feel for parents now who have young children. I know that the distractions are real. And when you look at, if I had missed my daughter's moment with the wind, say I had a screen in my hand and I was looking at that and she gasped into the wind and I just didn't attend to it. And she looked to me. She's looking at me with a cue that really says, is this important, Mom? Should I keep paying attention to this? And when I look back, I say, that's my signal that yes, this is important. But if I hadn't, she would have filed that in a category, a brain category that says not important, and moved on to the next thing. And noticing that the screen is important, she would start making that her neurological importance. And so her brain pattern. And so our brains want to know what's important to pay attention to. And when you think about your baby, think about, what do you want them to pattern their brain on? Do you want them to pattern their brain on the million-year-old perfect technology we have at our disposal at any given moment, or this new technology that we're only learning a little bit about how it actually causes the brain to develop in a less dimensional way without that symphony in random experiences. And so the context is missing. For example, if you have one app that does one thing and you have another app that does another thing, then you have a toy on the ground that beeps and moves. These things are random experiences to the brain. They might mean pleasure, but they're not going to mean much else. Versus when you lean into the wind, for example, and you do that so many times, you discover that the wind coming out of the south is warm. And what that means is it might mean there's a summer storm coming. And then your brain tunes into the smell that's happening in that moment and the behavior of the birds. And this is how our brains were designed, to tune into all these experiences that aren't random, that are happening in this larger conversation of the natural world, and then to put it together in context so then it can predict the next moment correctly. But when we have random experiences, then it structures the brain in a disorganized way. And that's one reason why we have so much dysregulation in young childhood and now in teens and adults.
Maybe talk about what dysregulation means and then what we can do about it.
Yeah, so dysregulation is really, there's a lot of people who are talking about self-regulation and emotional regulation. It's a big thing in the world of education now and in occupational therapy and counseling, because so many children have a difficult time regulating their emotions, meaning if they get upset, calming themselves down, or if they're kind of sleepy and tired, getting themselves excited or interested in something, being motivated. Yeah. So we are designed to regulate in relationship to everything else. I don't like to use the term self-regulation because I feel like it's a misnomer, and it really gives people the idea that we should be able to do something alone that we can't do alone. For example, if it's hot outside, we have to downregulate our temperature. So we're regulating in relationship to the temperature. If our parent is upset, then our bodies are literally tuning into that upset and that the stress of our parents or the stress of our children. And we are regulating in relationship to each other. My favorite neuroscientist, Lisa Feldman Barrett, likes to say, I don't know if you're familiar with her work, brilliant, but she likes to say that the best thing for our nervous systems is another person. And the worst thing for our nervous systems is another person. So we don't regulate on our own. We regulate in relationship. And it's probably the most important skill we can learn. And it's not automatic. It's something we have to develop. We have to build the skill of regulation in order to then be able to focus and attend and stay with a task, to learn and expand, to push through, to problem solve. Anything that we need to do to be successful, we need to be able to regulate ourselves first.
what are some of the things that people can do specifically in these early months to help design for a better outcome than what you're seeing in some of those third or fourth graders that you're seeing struggle now?
hmm I have one chapter in Wild Inside. It's called Fly the Baby. And I came up with this. Well, I didn't come up with this term, actually. This was a mother that I had worked with came up with this term.
Yeah.
And a brilliant expression to explain, to answer exactly that question. So what happened was I was talking to her about this serve and return with the natural world and with the wind, and how babies are tuning in all the time to natural stimuli. All we have to do is step outside the door and then watch and see what they're interested in. And she thought, oh, okay, they're not really interested in much. She had an infant at the time. And then I got a call from her one day and she goes, oh my gosh, I get it. I just flew the baby and it was amazing. And I said to her, what is fly the baby? And she said, well, I took her outside like you said, and I held her on my hip and I noticed that she kind of turned in a direction. And so I just thought, I'll follow. And she said, so I walked to where it looked like she was looking and we ended at a tree. And she said, there was a bird in the tree. And she's like, I didn't think she could be looking at the bird. And she said, but I think she was. And so then she said, I thought I would just keep following where she was pointing or where she was looking. And she said, we end up at trees. We end up at the barnyard. We end up at all these amazing places. And she said she really was tuning in. And every time I followed her lead, it was like she was ready to try the next thing. And so that's how you expand on their interest, on their focus, on their experience of safety in the world too, because that's important. So each tiny little interaction like that, and you can take 5 minutes during the day and do this for 5 minutes, because once you do it for 5 minutes, it just feels so good to both of you that you want to do more of it. But set yourself up for success and just plan for 5 minutes a day. Start there and see where it leads you.
Oh, I love that. I've never heard about that term, flying the baby. That's a first on fourth trimester. Thank you.
Yeah. I think it was really the perfect term.
Yeah, following their lead. It's so true. And I think that's babies teach us so much as parents, as life. It's a forcing function to slow down.
Mm-hmm.
We're busy, busy, busy.
I agree. I've taken an enormous amount of courses over my 30 years, and I'm a research reading junkie. And the most I've learned really are from my own children and the hundreds, maybe thousands of children I've worked with. And the beautiful thing about science now and evidence-based practice is that it's just catching up to what we inherited from our ancestors over 1 million years of these tiny little micro interactions with the natural world. And science, I just read another article today that talked about this contextual experience, a sensory engagement with the world, and how essential it is that we engage in that way. And so, yeah, children are amazing at it. And so I use another term called NatureLed. And that is where NatureLed came from as well, from learning from children. I heard a lot about child-led and parent-led and adult, all these LEDs. And when I was putting together my framework to work with parents and other therapists and to teach what I understood, what really came forward was watching these children let nature lead them. And so that's where NatureLed comes from, because once again, it's the most brilliant developmental experience. We can't contrive if something is good.
No.
And so when we let nature lead, children naturally seek what they need to develop to the best of their ability.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this wisdom with us. Kathleen, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners as some final thoughts?
I think what I'd like parents to know, especially in these early times, is that It's going to be great. And there's no messing up. There's opportunities in front of us. And to give yourself permission to listen to your voice. Yes, use the evidence, all those things. But first, tune into your own voice and trust yourself. Trust your baby's million-year-old technology that they arrived with. And trust that they came to you for a reason because you have something for them. And they'll show you that.
Yeah. Wonderful. Kathleen, where can people find out more about you?
Thanks, Sarah, for that opportunity. They can go to my website, KathleenLockyer.com, and I'm sure you'll link that for people. And they'll find different resources there. There's an upcoming parent course. There's courses for occupational therapists and allied health professionals, of course. But also my book, Wild Inside, is a great place to start. And it gives the full arc of my experience of being a parent and a therapist as well, with a lot of good science in there, but great stories too. And that can be found on Amazon, or your local bookstore can order it anywhere you buy your books. So.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much again for this conversation. We will have links to your resources in the show notes, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sarah.
You can subscribe to this podcast in order to hear more from us. Thank you for listening, everyone, and I hope you'll join us next time on the Fourth Trimester. The theme music on this podcast was created by Sean Trott. Hear more at soundcloud.com/Sean Trott. Special thanks to my true loves, my husband Ben, daughter Penelope, and baby girl Evelyn. Don't forget to share the Fourth Trimester podcast with any new and expecting parents. I'm Sarah Trott. Goodbye for now.
Hello again, bicycle man. I know you're doing all that you can. I wrote the song, simple and true. I wrote the song, I'll sing a song for you. You got your wheels, you got your gears. You ride around town without any fear. You got your pedals, you got your brakes. You always wear your helmet for safety's sake. Hello again, bicycle man. I know you're doing all that you can. I wrote the song, simple and true. I wrote the song, I sing a song for you. Hello again, bicycle man. I know you're doing the best that you can. I wrote the song, simple and true. I wrote the song, I sing a song for you.